Okay, so the summer school is combining two important topics of our research activities. On the one hand, the topic of climate sensible urban design, and you can see on the example of the sea town Vienna, how the building activities, how the design of the infrastructure and the greenery is forming a kind of strategy of climate sensible urban design. And the other topic is the knowledge-based campus development, looking on all those issues which are going on in our buildings, but also in the public space. We are currently living in a phase of crisis and challenges. My impression is that Corona, the pandemic, has initially pushed the challenges of climate change a little bit into the background, at least until the flood disaster in the summer 2021, last July, especially in North Rhine-Westphalia, but also in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Luxembourg, and so on. So we have seen how these effects of the climate change are turning small streams into raging rivers, a flooded street with flooded cars gets visible, houses are collapsing, the infrastructure is coming to an end, and at least many dead people and a lot of people who have lost their houses and their homes. So, and besides this, in other countries in the Southern and Eastern Europe, we have seen these pictures which show a dramatic consequence also out of the climate change. We see how forest fires are destroying the existing landscape. So, and this climate crisis will remain and it will intensify. And this was confirmed by the latest intergovernmental panel on climate change report, which is just published several days ago. And I don't want to read what I just put here on the slide as a kind of summary for policy makers. But what is really visible when you read this report is that cities and urbanized regions are addressed in an important way. Cities are somehow both. They are victims on the one hand, and they are perpetrators of climate change. And coming to our discipline, I will point out that the built city is somehow a product of our planning, our strategy of urban development, such as, for example, what you see here, the car-friendly city, which has enormously increased the emission of climate damaging gases and the ceiling in our city. I want to show you a picture from Aachen, the central part of our city where we are sitting at the moment. We are looking on a famous building, the cathedral, and you see in the 1950s and 60s how this open space was somehow used as a parking area. And this summer and the last summers, this parking area was transformed into a public space which could be usable for all generations. Children had a lot of fun to use this kind of sandbox, which is organized from our university. And this shows you the link between the activities of our university and the detailed organization and conceptualization of public space. So, but I want to point out that somehow, as a consequence of our strategies in the field of planning, cities are really currently suffering from consequences of climate change. In the summer months, we have extreme decrease from a heat wave to the heating up of the inner city neighborhoods, and as you have seen, flooding and heavy rainfalls. And I want to point out as a researcher that the human environment system and its function are undergoing profound changes. And these consequences of climate change and increasing environmental stresses do not affect people's living condition equally. People with lower social status are more affected by the heat issues and the results of the environmental problem. And here you see a normal street, which is really influenced in the quality of its function by the car mobility. And I would say that this kind of mobility, and I will refer to it later on, is one of the main problems we have to address. So we can counteract climate change through planning measures. What does this counteraction mean for us as actors in this human university system with a focus on campuses? The city of Aachen is very much characterized by universities and the university campuses. Here you see in blue the campus developments. A part of the campus development is now under construction, like the campus Milaten, which is, when you compare the size of this campus in relation to the inner city, somehow the same size, or other campuses like the campus West, they are just under planning issues, and the construction will start soon. But what I want to point out is that in the transition from an industrial to a knowledge society, knowledge is becoming increasingly important as a kind of new raw material for working and living in cities. So university, educational and research institutions are becoming a kind of magnets for talents, while at the same time promoting creativity and innovation. They also play a crucial role as a location factor. That means, in addition to their innovative and comparative function and their gateway function for educational aspirants and highly qualified people from all over the world, they have a kind of symbolic function as beacons and anchor points of knowledge-oriented urban development. And university can increase, and this is one of my important points, the attractiveness of a city and a region. And attractiveness is really combined at the moment with this topic of life quality, with sustainability, and with all the challenges of climate change. And this we see when you look on, for example, master plans of cities and regions. They are not only looking on, let's say, the built structure, but they are looking on open spaces, on greenery, on those attractors like universities, as an important backbone of cities' identity. So against this background, it seems useful to differentiate more precisely the various dimensions that promote this interaction. And I want to point out some of these dimensions. First of all, it's the economic dimension. A colleague of mine, Willem van Winden, highlights the cooperation between the city, the economy, and the university as a kind of symphony of progress, as a central form of cooperation, a cooperation with the goal of economic growth, as he pointed out. So on the one hand, the universities could become engines for regional development, strengthen the competitiveness of companies and promote business startups in the region. And on the other hand, a strong economy could provide opportunities for researchers and for students. He speaks of a so-called knowledge pearl, which is somehow not looking at the huge university, but of strategies of knowledge to create innovation and to promote startups. The other dimension is the demographic and social dimension. So the composition of the population is crucial to the vitality and vibrance of a city. We are currently facing, at least in Germany and in Europe, the challenge of dealing with demographic change, in particular an aging society. And students, that means you all, are relevant to the city as producers on the one hand, but as consumers of cultural offering, and cultural activities makes city and the region alive. And we have, and this is our, let's say, main topic, the urban design dimension. The knowledge society is not spatially independent. That means locations are urban, they can promote reurbanization, and somehow we have to be aware that knowledge needs public and has a possibility to create public space and public spheres. And last but not least, it's the ecological dimension. Campuses can play a pioneering role in combating climate change, and the issue of mobility plays a major role in this context. So we need to think about the new kind of sustainable mobility. So all these dimensions are important when we want to answer the question, how can we concretely develop our university campus in a sustainable way? Of course, we don't have only one typology of campuses. I know a lot the campus in Zurich because I studied there and I had the opportunity to accompany the urban design and urban development of the campus. And I know that we have a lot of typology. We have different cities where these university campuses are located in. And we have different uses and different designs. And there are also different components which are influencing the ecological balance. And I want to point out some of these components. On the one hand, we have the building sector, which accounts for around 40% of CO2 emission, and this is a lot. And there are a lot of efforts to reduce this CO2 emission by all these measures which you see here. And these are pictures from a dissertation of one of my PhD students. So whether Germany becomes climate neutral by 2040, or now we are discussing about 2038 or 2035, that means that the building sector has to take an important role in this aim. And we have the urban mobility, which is including walking, cycling, scooting, and public transportation, as well as private cars, and all kinds of services and delivery vehicles. So when we talk about the level of mobility, we might expect to discuss the relative benefits of different engineering and infrastructure, system capacity, speed, and flow. But what is my main message in this introduction speech is that even if we have cars, we have private cars, without any emission, without any noise, all this kind of vehicles, they need space. And a colleague of mine from Vienna, Mr. Knopflacher, is illustrating this need of space. And we have to deal with this issue in an integrated and in a complex way, because mobility is linked to different scales. It's linked to the local scale, it's linked to the neighborhood street, to the single house, and to the city. And we have to ask ourselves, how can we implement mixed use? Because mixed uses are important to reduce the need of mobility by cars and to strengthen climate-friendly mobility. So we have to ask ourselves, what requirements do we need to have qualitative open space where we can implement and organize different uses and different activities. But last but not least, I want to introduce one of our main important topics at the moment. It's the topic of urban resilience. It's not a new topic, because we know that even the European Union since 2030 is underlining the importance of resilience to disaster and the ability of independently renewal of cities and neighborhoods, also campus developments after the crisis. And at the moment, we are focusing also in the German policy very strongly on this issue. In May of this year, there was a publication of a kind of memorandum of urban resilience. I was part of this working group, and we pointed out, and you can have this publication in the internet, what is necessary for communities, for cities, for stakeholders, for universities to implement more resilience. And I want to point out today that a good concept of urban resilience must follow the criteria of climate mitigation and adaptation, and it is based on at least 5 capabilities: robustness, flexibility, learning capacity, multidisciplinarity, and holistic approaches. And all these points of a concept, they are part of our summer school. So we need to further development our, I would say, education and research castle, and some of the universities behave a little bit like this, not our university, but I know a lot of universities who behave in this issue. They have to develop their campuses, their strategies into climate sensitive places for learning and for living. I want to show you at the end of my presentation one example where I could work on during the last year since 2013. It's a campus development in Berlin. You all know the former airport, Tegel, and now this airport is developed into a new campus. And in the center, there will be a university. So the university is somehow the attractor of a sustainable new kind of urban development. And when you look in this three-dimensional illustration, you see on the one hand the campus, but you see also a lake in the center of this new reactivated brownfield. And you don't see normal streets, you see greenery, which can be used for autonomous cars, for public transportation, and so on. And in this strategy, we try to combine the technical issues, the new technical inventions, but also a very deep and multidisciplinary strategy of sustainable development. So my message is that we need a forward-looking and ambitious concepts which takes our knowledge and transfer it into strategies of climate change and a kind of networking in this interdisciplinary but also international way. So at least my last message is we are looking forward for these ambitious concepts. We want to combine the ecological issues with social issues, and at the same time we have to include the focus of aesthetic aspects, because when we are talking about the quality of life, we need to have this integrated view. And my wish is that we conceptualize a little bit this question of confidence, and this I like to discuss with you during the next days. So thank you from my side, and I hope it was not too strongly focused on urban design and urban development, but this is, let's say, our main focal point, but we are successful when we look on these issues in an integrated and multidisciplinary way. Thank you.